have a bone to pick with Wizards of the Coast around the implementation of mill in Magic the Gathering, and especially recently. I get it. You don't want to do it the right way because A, you're probably going to break a limited environment, and B, you don't want to just break it in all constructed formats because it is the most salt-inducing archetype to all casuals out there. If you're mad at mill, you're probably still a casual, or you're just playing bad Magic or a Titan player. Whatever it is, there is some overlap in some of that, and the Minecraft parkour in the back is just a little bit of a joke at this point. I promise I won't draw it out too long, but let's talk about a recent spoiler from the Final Fantasy set and how I think there is some problems in how we're going about this. If we genuinely want to make mill a thing in standard in some way, shape, or form, or just get the arena zoomers to get excited about it, we can print better Magic cards. The Water Crystal is blue and 2 for a legendary artifact that says blue spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So A, it's an artifact, it's pretty easy to deal with, it's really high costed. When you think about like the average constructed player, they're playing Pioneer, Modern, Pauper a little bit. Not many are playing Standard and Paper unless you're like grinders and everything. So in those general formats, this is a pretty high costed artifact that just does nothing when it enters. Also, again, you can't stack multiple copies of it because it is a legendary artifact. Now, flavorfully so, that makes sense, but in terms of gameplay implementation, it's a little unfortunate. Now, the rest of it says if an opponent would mill 1 or more cards, so not put into their graveyard. The differentiating factor here is I want to make sure this is different from Fraying Sanity. Fraying Sanity is a curse you put on a 1 player, and if they would put a card into a graveyard, the amount of cards that they put in the graveyard that turn, they just mill that many. Notably, if an opponent would mill 1 or more cards, so if they mill 1 versus mill 30, this triggers, they mill that many cards plus 4 instead. So to synergize with this, you want individual instances of mill or cards that just mill, a low amount, maybe like Hedron Crab triggers, Ruin Crab triggers. Mesmeric Orb is the notable busted part about this, but we'll touch on that in a second. And then 6, blue and 4, tap this. You don't sacrifice, this was repeatable. Each opponent mills cards equal to the number of cards in your hand. So it's very specific. This is very much a control card, very much a play slow, put this down later in the game, hold up a counter spell or removal spell, stabilize, untap with this, and then you're kind of going crazy. You always got something to do with your empty mana type of card. The problem with this is that, again, it just doesn't enter and do anything, right? It's 4 mana. It doesn't even get reduced if a condition is met. Now, the other versions in this cycle are actually notably really powerful in their own right. We have one that's, doubles counters, one that gains more life, blah, blah, blah. So I just feel like the Water Crystal is just the weakest implementation of this. Like, this could have definitely lost the bottom text and just costed 2. Like, if this was blue and blue, and eliminated the bottom text and blue spells cost 1 less to cast or something, you can even remove that. If you just said an opponent would mill more cards, mill that many plus 4, and then you kept the bottom text and didn't have the reduction and still made it like a legendary artifact, I feel like this card would actually be playable. There's a world where I would play this in Modern Mill for that effect to synergize with Mesmeric Orb. But notably, all that yap about Mesmeric Orb, a long lost artifact, pun intended, of Modern. Whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. Now, at some point in Modern, this was fast enough. Modern is much faster now in a post-fatal push. Post-Modern Horizons 1, Post-Modern Horizons 2, Post-Modern Horizons 3 world, Mesmeric Orb is way too slow in a world of free spells where people aren't necessarily tapping out for 1-for-1 value. Mesmeric Orb with that card, notably, it's on your opponent's turn, so it works with Mesmeric Orb on their untap. If they mill 1 off each of those, they would mill 5 in total, 1 plus the 4. So that makes it really powerful, just not necessarily, again, game ending. If they untap 3 lands, they're milling 15. If they untap 4 lands, they're milling 20. And it's not just lands, it's permanents as well, so creatures untapping and everything. But still, nowadays, if a Ragavan hits you, untapping and milling 5 isn't really equating to the value that Ragavan has gotten that opponent from just swinging in. So regardless, it's powerful. I think if the One Ring was still around, there would be a world where a mill control deck with Mesmeric Orb and the One Ring was possible and something like that. But regardless, the One Ring is a whole other problem that we don't need to bring back just to enable ring mill control, which actually was a real deck list, by the way. We don't need to bring that back. But regardless, the Water Crystal, because of how expensive it is, it is a control card that they want to enable in standard, right? This is a card that is going to get standard players excited. It's part of a cycle. It's recognizable. And I think a lot of arena players are going to meme around with this card. And so when it comes to that, if we look at the standard metagame, unfortunately, there's a lot of aggro there. And so the blue decks generally have to try and be faster or tempo out. Mono red aggro and Is It Prowess by miles are the best deck. I mean, honestly, Is It Prowess is probably going to get a ban soon. If we take a look at the last 90 days, it's again double the metagame. Last year, it's still for some reason the most successful deck out here. 30 days, 14 days. It is almost a third of the metagame. 7 days. I think some emergency ban will happen of standard, and I hope when that happens, something happens with modern as well. But if something doesn't get banned out of red, then, you know, if something does, I should say, get banned out of red, then we could see the return of a slower metagame that allows for things like this. Now, currently, the implementation of blue, or the most popular version of it in terms of control, in my opinion, is the Azorius Omniscience deck. So you're playing out Omniscience, you're cheating it out, and then eventually you might win with something like a Meringue River Regent, which you can still cast and shuffle back into your deck and draw a bunch of cards. Like Meringue River Regent is really cool just because of its Omen tech. So if you have the Omniscience out, you can play its instant side, and then you can draw a bunch of cards, and then you can still this shuffles back in, you keep going. There's still a bunch of other options in the deck that allow you to go through your deck. Stock up is absolutely insane in this as well. And so you can eventually find your way from there, but you're cheating something out. It's kind of a combo already. It's just show and tell with training wheels, and to be fair, a lot slower and weaker, but you get what I mean. That doesn't mean there isn't a home for it though, because when it comes to control in standard, there is Azorius control. And in one of the win conditions of Azorius control is Jace the Perfected Mind. It is, it's there, right? Like you can cast Jace for 4, have it be a bad Fractured Sanity, target player mills X amount of cards in a longer game. Of course, you're probably using it for its smaller modes. It has a little bit of combat reduction. It has some draw ability in the longer game, but of course you can just play it out as a giant mill spell. Now there are options to be able to play this card alongside River Churn Monument out of the sideboard. So against the slower matchups, you could bring in the River Churn Monument and mill your opponent slowly. Obviously that's just not relevant in a world of Is It Prowess and mono red aggro everywhere, and a little bit of combo just trying to help speed things along. But that also means that cards like this are being thought of, because mill is being thought of as a way to get people in and stay in standard. Cards are going to be in standard longer, and where I am hopeful is that as that mill guy, that more cards that are mill cards are introduced. I am primarily a mill player in Modern, Pauper, and Legacy, more so in Modern. And when it comes to that, Jace the Perfected Mind is playable in Modern, notably like a 1 of, maybe a 2 of. It's like a bad copy of Visions of Beyond and Fractured Sanity. The flexibility is worth the time. It gets there, especially if you're memeing this under like an Ensnaring Bridge. It does a lot. So when it comes to that, River Churn Monument being that sideboard piece is also another cool option. Like, yes, it's there. The exhaust mechanic is kind of funny. You get to double up what's in their graveyard already if they filled up a bunch of things. Not really, again, a relevant thing when it comes to standard, but in these slower metagames where opponents are feeding the graveyard slowly, River Churn Monument can be really powerful, but that second ability is an exhaust ability. So it's really just like a one-shot type of win. Get there and you're fine. But it adds to the control aspect of it because it gives you something to do with your mana over time, that you can like untap and just kind of any number of players mill 2 cards. If you need to feed your graveyard with your own graveyard shenanigans, you can do that as well. River Churn Monument is a step in the right direction towards adding mill. And I feel like what I like about this is that these cards being introduced, I add to the idea that they don't want a hard mill deck just to be like a thing in standard, and you have to do a lot of things to make that viable. Like you have to have like good removal alongside the blue. The blue part of it is going to be the mill part of it, but the control and counter magic of blue isn't just going to be enough. You need life gain, so cards like Crypt Incursion, you need Fatal Push type cards, and who knows if we want to introduce those necessarily into standard at the moment. You need the control aspect, you need some type of clock, and Hedron Crabs and Ruin Crabs are part of that. So you're missing a whole part of it. And so if you're just going to pepper some of these pieces in, you have to play a whole different strategy and have mill be an attrition win condition. Kind of like how in Modern, the Lantern Control deck works, where the deck just wins through boredom, but in the long game, it is just trying to mill you out. It is a mill deck at the end of the day, but closer to a kind of control prison-y strategy when it comes to that. But now in Modern, the metagame is just too fast for a card like this. It's just not going to work. Boros Energy, one of the most egregious mistakes of decks of Modern Horizons 3 design I've ever seen. Hopefully they ban something out of this soon. Is it Prowess and Corey Steelcutter are all over the place as well, because they have a good matchup in it. Or actually, I shouldn't say they have a good matchup into this. Honestly, Energy has like a lot of removal, so it doesn't beat that. But a lot of times, Is it Prowess can actually beat up on the other decks. Like Eldrazi Ramp can beat up on Boros Energy, but Is it Prowess beats up on Eldrazi Ramp. And so it can just get there. It can just be fast enough, and just having that consistency, or the resiliency, I should say, of Corey Steelcutter does give Is it Prowess an angle. Although it might lose to Boros Energy, it still has the options it needs if Boros Energy doesn't find its Galvanics or its Static Prisons and stuff like that. Regardless, the metagame is really aggressive. It's trying to beat Boros Energy, and the problem is Mill just doesn't have that great of a matchup into Boros Energy. It has game. It's not like a lights out combo deck. You can play your Crypt Incursions, you can play your removal. It's just Boros Energy has pieces that have so much resiliency. They gain so much value on ETB. Before you can do anything, the deck has done so much already. And so that's the problem. When it comes to a do nothing artifact being introduced into Modern, or introduced into an archetype that's had to evolve over time, it's just not going to do anything. You need artifacts and mill things to come in and have an immediate effect, because mill is already operating on an axis that any other deck is not. You're not affecting the board state necessarily. You're not affecting the hand necessarily. You're not affecting life at all. You're affecting the graveyard and the library. Like sometimes the most useless zones that just have no meaning in the game whatsoever. The graveyard can have a meaning. The hand arguably has more, right? Like a Thoughtseize effect is better than like just a Tome Scour, or a removal spell on a creature on board is more important, although you are playing that, than like a surgical. Most of the time, Surgical Extraction can be insane alongside Extirpate against combo and against some key pieces. But what I'm getting at is that if you're gonna make a mill card, you have to have it be impactful immediately, or be so overwhelmingly impactful that it can just end the game if you untap with it. Now that card does not end the game. I'm gonna untap with that and pay 6 mana to mill anywhere between 0 to 8 cards. That's awful. That's terrible. That's one of the worst rates I've ever seen. Why would I use a card like that? Especially if I was to adapt this into the Omniscience list, I could play it for free, but I still have to pay 6 for an activated ability. I don't think Omniscience decks want to be doing that. They want to just almost want to win on the spot. And so it doesn't really have a place for it. And so that's why I want to see future mill cards have immediate impact, or have cards that are analogous and help these mill archetypes. Maybe, you know, Drown in the Loch gets reintroduced, or Crypt Incursion gets introduced as well. Actually, on that note, let me see. I don't believe oh my God, I can't even type. Crypt Incursion. I don't think this card, yeah, it's not even standard legal, it's Pioneer legal, but I feel like you need a card like this to even make work. Like you need an anti-aggro tool, a really good anti-aggro tool alongside good removal to be able to even make anything work when it comes to mill. Now in Legacy, you also have viability as well. The problem is when you want something to enter Legacy, it has to be really, really good. Now in Legacy, you have Painter. Painter is your win condition when it comes to in conjunction with where is the damn artifact? Grindstone. So Grindstone is 1, you pay 3, activate, target player mills 2 cards. If those 2 cards share a color, you repeat the process. So you can mill someone out if you cast something like Painter's Servant, name a color, ideally you're naming blue, and then you can cast your Force of Wills into that. Anything now pitches to your Force of Wills or your Force of Negations if you're playing it, blah, blah, blah. So Mono Blue Painter is the deck of choice now. Red Painter is still a thing. You work with an artifact recursion package that has a really good mid-range, whereas something like Blue Painter is like a controlled tempo-y type of list. You're still playing Urza Saga because the value proposition is like really great, but regardless, Urza Saga may not be the best thing in the Legacy metagame right now, all things considered, if Oops All spells at the top, but having a combo that works alongside Force of Will is pretty good at a baseline. So you're not going to introduce it into Modern because it's just too slow. Legacy is a whole other league by itself, although being blue does help it, but Legacy is a combo insta-win. You're not grinding your opponent out, whereas you're doing that in Modern. So the last bastion of that being playable is in Modern. And Pauper's a whole other discussion. The card's not common, so nowhere is that going to be in the discussion. There's no way that card is ever going to be in common in any iteration of it. And if it is, it's just really bad. You're playing Pauper Simic Petitioners, which has its own angle on the metagame and good in its own way, and that deck can just be where it is. I don't think it needs much introduction, it just needs metagame forces to work with it. So ultimately where I'm trying to get at is if we are going to print bad cards like this and introduce mill into standard, we need to have cards be more impactful on cast or on ETB, because playing mill sets you back so far in terms of the accesses you're working on, or we need cards that support and provide anti-aggro tools if we're going to make mill work, because in order to get there, to get to that mill condition, again, you have to work so hard. So it's not just about casting the mill spells and having good mill spells, but it's also about stopping what your opponent's doing, because generally speaking, it's just going to be more efficient than what you're doing because they're playing the game on the axis the way Richard Garfield intended, not necessarily just milling your opponent out card by card.